Hi, hello, welcome. Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, or good very early morning. Thank you for joining us for this exciting webinar today, Securing the Tracks, Cybersecurity and Innovation in North America's Rail Industry. We'll get started in just a minute here as we wait for attendees to trickle in. But as we're getting started, my name is Morgane Keul. I'm CUTRIC's Strategic Partnerships Lead. I'm based in Montreal, and I'm super delighted to be able to open up the session for today. All right, we'll just get started here. If you can go to the next slide, please. I wanted first, most importantly, to extend a very warm thank you to CYLUS for co-hosting and sponsoring this session. We're super grateful for your support on this and are really delighted to have you as a member of our consortium and to have the opportunity to collaborate with you on this very critical topic. So in this session today, we'll be hearing from cybersecurity experts from RiskSec Group, Hitachi Rail, CYLUS, of course, and the Toronto Transit Commission through a engaging panel discussion. There will be about 10 minutes towards the end for a dedicated Q&A. So definitely please share please share your questions in the Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your Zoom page there, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end. But before we jump to the panel, I'm going to share about CUTRIC for any new folks on the line, and particularly on our rail innovation strategy. Then I'll pass the mic to Yoni from CYLUS to share about their services and their role in the space. Next slide, please. So as a few of you today may not be familiar with us, CUTRIC, we are a member-owned nonprofit technology consortium that offers technological and financial knowledge, innovation and consulting, and government relations and advocacy when it comes to decarbonized transit and mobility. So in a nutshell, we support the development and commercialization of technologies through industry-led collaborative R&D. We've got a small and mighty team here across several provinces, and I'm joining you from Quebec today. Next slide, please. So as an innovation consortium, CUTRIC, we decided to focus on rail starting in 2020 when we worked with Transport Canada to run a comprehensive report identifying the top technology areas in passenger and freight rail that could advance Canada's rail ecosystem. And I won't go through all the phases today, but fast forward to where we are. CUTRIC's rail innovation strategy focuses now on these three project concepts, which were identified in our Smart Rail Innovation Program summary report released last year. So in the short term, we are looking to leverage our predictive modeling tools for which we have a lot of experience on the bus and transit side and applying it to rail. In the medium term, this is the Canadian Cybersecurity Initiative, the focus for today, and I'll share about that in a second. And then in the long term, our rail strategy is looking to develop a longer term consortium-based demo project. The focus is to be determined, but most likely to come out of the short or medium-term initiatives, whichever our members indicates are more valuable. So yes, without further ado, next slide. CUTRIC, we're super delighted once again to be hosting this webinar with CYLUS because it ties directly into our medium-term project aimed at advocating for a dedicated fund looking to secure our rail and transit digital infrastructure. So with that in mind, and after numerous consultations with our members and greater network, we are proposing the Canadian Cybersecurity Innovation Initiative in Rail and Transit, or CERT for short. And this is a $100 million 8-year federal and industry co-investment to secure Canada's mobility infrastructure. So as many of you know, from light rail to streetcars to buses to freight, the growing integration of digital technologies has created critical vulnerabilities across the mobility sector. So cyber attacks on these systems can lead to, severe consequences, as you know. So the CERT, overall, we aim to advance regulatory guidelines, cutting-edge cybersecurity technologies, applied research, and workforce development in the rail and transit sectors. Next slide. So we have a problem, right? I think we can all agree on that. The global cybersecurity market, and part of, what adds to this is that our market is experiencing exponential growth due to increasing cyber threats and an evolving digital landscape. So the problem we're facing is that the rail industry as a critical infrastructure sector is particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks. So following, again, our broad industry-wide consultation sessions, targeted engagements, one-on-one discussions since 2022, many of our rail operators and agencies have indicated that they're unaware of the specific requirements needed to secure their digital systems. Our industry members have also highlighted that that there's quite a disparity across agencies in their ability to address the cyber challenges. So larger agencies may have the internal resources to develop things like a multi-stage procurement process, but in contrast, smaller or under-resourced agencies can lack in this funding and in-house knowledge to even initiate the process. So based on this feedback, this is why we're proposing this 100 million co-investment model. Next slide. So really, in a nutshell, again, the CERT is really addressing the concerns that I just touched upon by seeking these 4 main objectives. So objective number 1 is to really develop, convene, and implement a Made in Canada regulatory framework / best practices addressing cybersecurity and mobility as a public safety matter. And so to do this, we'd coordinate with federal departments like Transport Canada, Public Safety, Housing Infrastructure, and provincial and municipal governments. The second objective, critical piece, is developing unified standards. So working with partners to develop standards for procurement of cybersecurity compliant mobility applications, collaborating with international bodies to align with global best practices, and working with our transit agencies and industry partners to steer this development. The third objective as part of CUTRIC's program is to focus on this innovation leadership part. So establishing Canada as a global leader in low carbon public transit systems, cybersecurity research, fostering innovation through specific partnerships. We're thinking specifically between academic partners, universities, colleges, industry, and SMEs to develop solutions tailored to the sector specifically. Last but most certainly not least is this 4th objective, and that is focused on training and upskilling the cybersecurity workforce. So with that, we're looking to do things like develop and implement a standardized industry-informed cybersecurity training programs, micro-credentialing, working with CUTRIC's existing college and university partners that have programs already in place, and kind of adding cybersecurity as a critical piece of this. So with that, next slide, please, to wrap up. This program, we are calling on the Canadian government to drive a generational leap in public transit safety, resilience, and innovation. The federal portion, so half of the $50 million investment, will strengthen rail security against modern cyber threats, foster these Made in Canada technologies, build a skilled workforce, and streamline these national standards. So aligned with our country's modernization goals, this program reinforces national security and really ensures a trusted, future-ready rail system. So thank you for your time, and thank you everybody for joining. That's it on CUTRIC's role in our proposed program. I will drop my email in the chat below should anyone like to learn more about this program and our advocacy efforts. But now I'm very pleased and excited to introduce our co-host for today, Yoni Korlander, Technical Director for North America at CYLUS. Thank you, Yoni, and please take it away.
Thank you, Morgan, and good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'd like to start with a quick overview of who CYLUS is. But first, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Yoni Korlander. I'm a technical director at CYLUS of the North American market. I've been in the company for the past almost 5 years. My background is mostly in cybersecurity for the past, let's say, 20 years, not rail, but for the past 5 years, where when I'm here, like I've grown to see how complex and unique the industry is. So at CYLUS, we're focusing on giving rail operators a cybersecurity platform that built specifically for railway. Everything we do is designed to support service availability and safety, not in theory, but in real operational environments where signaling, rolling stock, wayside equipment, all of these systems have to work together. Our approach is to specialize deeply in rail, understanding the operational realities, and build a platform that fits naturally into how rail actually operates. Next slide, please. So CYLUS have been existing for the past 8 years. We have unique partners. We're in several committees, and like I said, our domain expertise is in the railway world and its supporting systems. So not just railway, but also the OT and IT around it. We have global customer base in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, India, Asia Pacific. Next slide, please. And maybe I'll start with the part where we're seeing the biggest momentum currently. So cybersecurity frameworks, especially for rail. So in Europe, frameworks like NIS Directive 2, TS 50701 that was built on 62443 IEC are becoming fundamental. IEC 63452 is something that's currently in the works. It should be released, I think, next year. And we feel that will push the industry even more. In North America, well, especially in the US, the TSA directives have created a real structure for how the government expects rail organization to approach cybersecurity for their critical system. And it's supported, like you see here, by the NIST and APTA frameworks as well. Asia Pacific, they have their own thing going on. Australia and Singapore have been the leaders with the AS 7770 and dedicated codes of practice for rolling stock and train control system. Like the common thread we see between these frameworks is that the world recognizes that rail has its own set of cybersecurity challenges, and it needs frameworks that build for rail and not just inherited from IT. Next slide, please. So how do operators actually put this into practice? That's basically where we come in. CYLUS One, our software, gives operators full visibility for their rail systems, from signaling to interlocking to onboard systems to supporting environments like depots and stations, either OT or IT. We provide real-time visibility, threat detection, vulnerability management, forensics, mitigations instructions in a way that specifically supports operational workflows and not disturbing them. Next slide, please. So just a few examples of the work we've done. So our project we delivered protecting mainline operators, securing onboard networks in the US as well, and helping operators getting full visibility to their system that historically have been a little hard to monitor, since we're talking usually about legacy systems and a lot of times unsupported devices. Each deployment is a bit different, but our goal is the same, like giving the operators clarity to the network and help them protect the service availability and safety across their entire network. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'm guessing that's pretty much leading to what we're doing here today. So thank you very much for your time. I'll hand the stage back to Morgan. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that presentation, Yoni. I think it really sets the stage nicely for the discussion, and so folks can get a great understanding for the great work that CYLUS does. So thanks again. All right, so we will hop into the panel discussion now. So again, I'm very delighted to be joined by Yoni, along with Ali Sayed, Cybersecurity Authority at Hitachi Rail, and Ivan Sestak, the Director of Cybersecurity Operations at the TTC. Mark Grant, co-founder of the RiskSec Group, will be moderating today. So without further ado, please take it away, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. And just start briefly with my background. So I've been in the IT industry for a very long time, and it was the CISO at CSX. And since then, I left there in 2021. And since then, I've been primarily engaged in helping railroads address the TSA cybersecurity regulations and working in a couple of other industries. Happy to be here. And before we get started, I think probably Ali and Ivan, if you could just briefly introduce yourself so folks can know a little bit about your background, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Ali Sayed. I just started at Hitachi Rail not long ago, even though I've only been there for a couple of weeks. I'm not new to rail. I worked in the Go Rail expansion project along with Metrolinx within Toronto for past 3 years. And before that, I've had significant experience, I would say, in the electricity industry, working with Ontario Power Generation and Hydro One. Ivan.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. My name is Ivan Sestak. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Operations at the TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission. My background spans roughly 20 years in higher education at York University and the University of Toronto, as well as a number of private sector companies ranging from Scene Plus to the beer store, securing everything from robots to subway cars. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. So let's get started with I think we'll start at a bit of a high level. And we have a lot of different perspectives reflected on the panel here today. So I would ask you, each of you, kind of from your vantage point, what do you think currently the most significant cyber threat and how that translates into risk is for the North American rail sector? And, a little bit maybe about how you've seen that shift or change, or what do you think the trajectory is going forward? You want to start, Ali?
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. I mean, we've seen different type of attacks against railway infrastructure. I will just limit ourselves to railway, not go beyond that. So against revenue collection, there has been ransomware incidents in multiple jurisdictions across the world, where all of your fare collection systems get blocked by ransomware, and then we have to recover from that. Then recently, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we've seen some directed attack from nation-state level attackers onto European infrastructure. And that's been a challenge. And other thing I would mention is that as we are modernizing the railway infrastructure, it opens the network and communications to threats that are commonly applicable to IT networks. So before modernization, everything was serial communications and closed systems. And now with the adoption of modern systems, new modules, custom commercial off-the-shelf systems, and IP communications, now the threat surface has increased. And the last thing I will say is that with the introduction of AI, that the speed at which the threats come at you has significantly increased.
There's a lot of very interesting data that resides in the OT environments, which traditionally I think have been somewhat isolated, but increasingly are more interconnected as people want to get that information and use it in their business.
Yeah, correct.
What do you think, Ivan?
So I was going to go next. At the TTC, our primary concern is actually human safety. We're a passenger transit agency, getting people to school and work and safely home again. So anything that would compromise that safety is our top concern. Passenger safety, rider safety. So any threat or risk that could move from the cyberspace through to the physical world is our biggest concern. Increasingly, as we're moving towards positive train control, and GPS controls, it becomes a concern for us because that could lead into train-to-train collisions if there's a compromise in those environments, or incursions into work zones. So if there's maintenance happening and trains are taken over due to a compromise, could lead to a human safety issue. So those are our biggest concerns. And as we're starting to look at automated train controls, operatorless driven streetcars and vehicles, the security of those platforms becomes even more significant to ensure that we have safety of not just the ridership, but those external to the subway, the streetcar, or the bus.
Yeah, I think I've heard people say the worst thing that can happen with positive train control is, someone could put the brakes on. But I think what people sometimes don't realize is the amount of instrumentation and connectivity that comes along with positive train control and the increase in the attack surface. So we've got ransomware, AI-enabled ransomware. We've got physical outcomes from cyber attacks. What do you think, Yanni?
Yeah, so where we sit as a real focus cybersecurity, we think, and I want to double down on what Ali said, we think one of the significant cyber risk right now is the growing gap between like how fast operational technology is becoming connected, and in comparison how slow like security teams are gaining visibility to that OT networks. So we're talking a lot about ransomware or nation state threats, but and those are real, by the way, but we feel like the core risk is critical operational systems are becoming more networked, more integrated, more dependent on digital data than they were ever before. While the operators themselves doesn't have like a clear continuous pictures of what those systems are doing, either because those systems can be too much really new or really old. And lack of visibility can mean either slow anomalies go undetected, so configuration drifts, unauthorized changes, abnormal signaling messages in the automatic train control, like Ivan mentioned. And also when something does happen, response might be a bit slower because teams are basically they're troubleshooting blindly. Maybe I'll just add that in the past couple of years, we noticed two major trends, especially in North America. First one is that operational systems are connected at a much faster rate than they used to. So train to ground links are now shooting like gigabytes of information per second, as well as digital wayside assets, the new interlocking generation, and things that used to be air-gapped, again, like Ali said, are now part of the architecture of the network. And second thing is more for like an intel insight we have is that threat actors are quietly getting better at targeting specific OT pathways, not through disruptive events, but through really subtle manipulations of a bit here, a bit there for specific rail-tailored attacks.
And
Yeah,
I'd like to add
certainly,
that the sophistication of some of the AI-generated attacks, for those of you that haven't seen it in the news recently, there was almost an entirely AI-generated attack using Anthropic. So those sophisticated AI attacks targeted towards particular OT systems is a huge threat to our industry as well.
yeah, no, I agree now. And so now it's a threat. And then as you had mentioned, Ivan, in the future, as we moved more and more towards automation, where right now there are people on the train who can understand that something unusual is happening and react to that, and that may not be the case, and it may already not in the future, but it may already not be the case in certain transit agencies. So certainly plenty to worry about now, and more to worry about in the future.
Mark, before we proceed, I also would like to add that the threat actors, they understand that security teams are getting better, and they're using supply chain angle. And we've seen a lot of those attacks in the past, I will say 4 or 5 years, where the supply chain gets compromised, and that's how the threat actors get hold of your environment and compromise your security. So I think that's a very important factor, and a threat, I would say as well, the supply chain vector.
Yeah, particularly in the OT space, I agree with that. As sometimes you get components which you think about as a bit of a black box, and embedded, inside that component, you're not sure exactly where some of those pieces came from. I agree with that completely. All right, look, a bit of a follow-up, Ollie, this is for you. And you work in an area in terms of security where you're focused on the most critical operational technologies for railroads. And, we also hear a lot about the concept of zero trust. And so the question for you and others, if you have input, is, do you think the concept of zero trust applies in an operational technology environment? And, if so, how do you kind of see that evolving, and what's your focus in terms of zero trust in the OT environment? And what are some of the challenges that you're encountering?
Thank you. Zero trust means different to different people. I like the NIST definition in their guidance, what they've provided, and I'll stick to that. And in terms of relevance to cybersecurity, rail cybersecurity, where it comes applicable is identity-centric access. So when the devices need access to some operation, or user needs access to a device, this is where we can enforce zero trust controls, right? So identity. Then we talk about the networking in terms of segmentation. How do we segment our networks, critical versus not critical, vital, non-vital, and adapt the models that have been prescribed from, say, IC 62443 or APTA, or the European standard TS 50701, and apply those kind of controls in rail environments. And then the last thing I would say is the continuous monitoring to make sure that we verify, basically trust but verify all kind of activity within the environment. So deploy the anomaly detection tools, behavior monitoring, and that are tailored to railway, because not every tool can be applied to every single environment. When you come from the IT into the OT, and specifically to the railway, the communications and the needs for communication is very different. So applying those controls, I think that would be applicable in this case. So I would say those 3 elements of zero trust are applicable within the OT environment. And in terms of challenges, like any infrastructure, consider electricity or roads or even railways, the life cycle of an asset or a system is much longer than your IT assets. IT assets will replace 3 to 5 years, right? Whereas OT assets, particularly in railway and electricity sector, it's like 50-year life cycle, right? So anything that was developed, say, in 80s or 90s that's still in use, how do you go and retrofit those systems with these modern controls? in terms of authentication, in terms of getting any signal out of those OT systems into our tooling, then the diversity of protocols. Everything in the railway sector is proprietary. There's very limited open standards that people use. So when you go from Hitachi to Siemens to Alstom or to whatever other systems there are, they're all very proprietary. So how do you apply all those rules and measures uniformly across those environments? That's I will say, a challenge that the operators and owners would have to contend with. Then there are operational constraints in terms of performance. Signal travel in CBT systems, CBTC systems is milliseconds, right? So as you add more layers of security or authentication or verification, it adds the latency to that communication. So that would be a consideration for applying these kind of controls. And the last thing, I mentioned that already, in the heterogeneous environment, if you have multiple vendors, how do you make that, make sure that everything is applied uniformly?
Yeah,
so I'll stop there.
The saying, we used to say that, in the freight rail industry, that, we move big things slowly. And so, introducing the new security protocols or technologies in the operational technology environment is not an easy task and doesn't happen quickly. So I completely agree with that. Yoni, a question for you. So when you think about the sort of complex integration between OT environments and IT environments, we talked a little bit about the interconnectivity and how that's increasing, the data flowing back and forth. But in terms of how you secure this heterogeneous environment, and particularly the interface between IT and OT, and the difference in the makeup of the people and the teams that support those environments, how do you bring that together and get sort of a comprehensive view of your security posture if you're a railroad and you have a lot of OT and you've got an important IT environment as well?
Great question, Mark. I often get steps questions, and usually I like to answer it in a very practical, technical steps that operators can take right now to move forward the security posture in the rail environment. So probably first step will be to gain visibility of your network. So before correlation and threat detection and responding and mitigating, both IT and OT teams, they need to look at the same picture and understand the network from each one of their sides, but have a unified network to look at. That usually means to deploy a visibility capability that understand rail assets and rail protocols and network behaviors that are specific for rail and not just generic for industrial patterns like PLCs or RTUs. And when IT and OT share a single view of what's going on in the network, on whether if it's on the wayside, they're signaling their onboard system, so they immediately eliminate blind spots and reduce the amount of work they have to do together. Second, I will probably say before playbook. Second, I will probably say integrating all their tools together. So most of them have a SIEM, a SOAR platform, various security controls. So instead of having different systems for IT and OT, try to integrate what they have together because they want to unify the alerts and the visibility. And instead of stitching together rail-specific telemetry and context that the system have and the teams already use. So usually it allows IT and OT maintain their workflow, but sharing information between the team. And the key here really is to make the OT data consumable for the IT team and vice versa. And last thing I mentioned is the playbooks that needs to reflect like operational realities. So we have special landscape we're dealing with. So you got the visibility, you got the integration, you need the response actions that won't disrupt your day-to-day or your safety critical system. So defining ahead of the incident, of course, playbooks with both teams on the table, what's being monitored, what are the thresholds that are specific to our real environment, what actions are considered to be safe and what's not, who is responsible for that, and they should also reflect constraints like the schedules of the trains, the operating hours, the maintenance windows, not just like a generic IT incident where you disconnect a computer from the network or quarantine it. So understanding the impact will cause the response to look better.
Yeah, excellent. I think the one of the challenges clearly that you've highlighted there is sort of the interaction between the teams, and having the getting the bandwidth to say, hey, we need to address this, and having the security people talk to the operational people. Embedded in everything you said, I think is the concept of sort of teamwork on those sort of challenges. So
yeah,
very good.
On big customers we met, sometimes the teams doesn't even know each other. It's like a completely different departments, different locations, different responsibilities. So yeah.
Yeah, the CISO's goal at any organization, any rail organization, should be to get invited to the chief operating officer's Christmas party. That would be a big win. All right, I have one for you. That we talk about, focusing still on the sort of the operational technology environment, and a core, sort of practice for the security team is vulnerability management. And you always want to patch everything to the extent you can, and that can be a challenge in an OT space for a railroad because of potential impacts to the reliability, for example, as one. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how do you go about prioritizing that type of work and working across the teams, again from a team perspective, to make those patches happen in a timely manner?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a challenge across the industry. And to Yoni's point, there's teams that don't know each other. They don't go to each other's parties. They don't go to the same barbecue in the summertime. It's completely separated. When I first joined the TTC, I mentioned how we don't just have air-gapped networks, we have air-gapped teams, where there's a lack of interaction between the teams, as well as with our vendors. So a technique that we've been using in the last little while is not blurring responsibilities or roles, but integrating the team so that there's more information sharing. The term IT/OT convergence has been bounced around for years, and that's not really what we're after. What we're after is that hybrid model where there's overlap between things such as operating systems. We have a team that manages Windows and Linux updates and patches on the IT side. They're close to it, they're familiar with it, and we've implemented information sharing about those vulnerabilities with the OT team. When we're looking specifically at critical systems in our operations, particularly ones that have safety certifications, it necessitates a closer working relationship between the teams internal as well as with our vendors, just ensuring that we have that communication, what can be patched, what cannot be patched, and figuring out compensating controls for what cannot be patched. Ultimately, again, TTC are concerned is with safety and operation in that order. If something is not safe to operate, we'll shut it down. So ensuring that anything that we're doing, we're testing, and ensuring that operations aren't impacted. How do we do that in almost a 24/7 environment? It's ensuring that communication with the vendors and understanding what the impact of patches and vulnerabilities are is clearly communicated. Understanding what's the impact if something is not patched, assigning it a severity. We have a risk assessment score that we've developed internally that we gauge how quickly do we need to address this vulnerability? What's the impact, both of doing it and not doing it, and then working to schedule that between the teams. Internally, that communication and that coordination is something that we're driving across the commission, so that we have more eyes on what we're doing, more input, and greater wisdom. It's not, I don't use that term wisdom lightly. It's having the right experience on the team and or interacting with the team to be able to make the right decision and do it in a timely manner.
Yeah, I think we're all familiar with everybody has a system that people in general understand, don't touch that system, right? Because it's too critical to us. And so it's understanding, I think, as you said, the context. You have to understand the business context of the environment, which vulnerabilities matter to you and which ones don't. So
exactly.
I agree.
And we're operating in an environment where we don't have dev and QA servers. The tracks, the signals, they're live. We don't have a replica of that in a lab somewhere in the back where we can measure the impact of patching to the latest firmware. It's something that we have to work through with our vendors and test as best we can in smaller, isolated environments.
Very good. Okay, let's just shift a little bit the focus and talk some about some different concepts around innovation, artificial intelligence. We've talked a little bit about that, and machine learning. And the first question is to you, Ali, and this is kind of the intersection of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, particularly in some of the rail, critical rail signaling and train control systems. And kind of, it's kind of a twofold question, kind of what are the most promising aspects of artificial intelligence in terms of security? And then what are the most challenging concerns about artificial intelligence as regarding security as well?
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep it brief given the time. I think we probably have a full agenda. I'm going to build on what Yanni said. It's early threat detection. So AI can definitely help with anomaly detection, and that's been around for, I'll say, 15, 20 years. And I think there is a good value to be had from there, provided that there is signal data going back to the machine. And building on that, I'll say AI can also help us in assessing the risk based on the context, the threats, and the profile of the asset, and can bubble up the risks to under-resourced teams to focus on the things that matter, which will have greater impact on the system. And it can also help with predictive maintenance of hardware assets on the tracks, as well as any technology debt and whatnot, in terms of highlighting as to how less secure it is or how aging the infrastructure is, and it can help us formulate a risk model. In terms of challenges, I've seen in the OT environments that there's data scarcity. The devices do not emit the signals that can help AI make a decision, or that data, the availability is not there. False positives. So there is still that element that machine needs a supervised learning. And initially, I've seen there are a lot more false positives, and then machine can be tuned, but perhaps the technology has gotten better over the past years. And then in the railway context, standards like European standards, for example, say 50126 or 50128, they look for transparency, as to how did we make decision on anything. And this is where AI models, because they're closed systems and closed algorithm, it may have challenges in terms of adoption. And the last thing I would say is that how we add AI components or change the system to receive the signal from the field, we would have to recertify the system according to the SIL level, which is safety integrity levels. As Ivan mentioned, safety is important in railway, and there has to be a very strong safety case before system can be put into commissioned or put into production. So those challenges, I believe, would probably be applicable in this particular case for adopting the new technology or changing the environment that exists out there.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Yanni, kind of as we think about the data, all the availability of the data, understanding the what's going on in the OT environment, and then translating that into something meaningful from a business perspective. There are really two avenues I think people can take with regard to security. One is to get some generic security product that can look at the data and try to make sense of it. And I think your organization has taken a little different approach, which is more, let's understand the business context and then be able to analyze the data and take the appropriate steps based on what we understand, that because we have a better understanding of the data. So can you talk a little bit about this sort of balance between generic solutions and more sort of rail specific solutions as you think about that?
Yeah, Mark. And again, I'll try to keep it short. So we feel the challenge, besides the generic OT and IT threats, is identifying rail-specific anomalies inside the data. So signals, messages, behaviors that look like pretty normal to a generic security tool, but we know they're not right. So a good example is abnormal behavior, let's say, from train to ground communication. Specifically, like we've seen stuff around manipulated balances or automatic train control messages. So for normal security solutions, these messages are just like small packets on the wire. They're not malicious on their own, and they won't trigger any security alert. But in rail context, a slight deviation in sequence or timing can indicate either a spoofing attempt or a misconfiguration or something that needs to be addressed. So our platform understands the operational meaning of the actual messages. It also knows the expected state of the train, the signaling mode, the timetable, the correct flow of safety critical communications. So it can spot, let's say, messages arriving from balances out of sequence, ATC messages or ATP messages with parameters that doesn't match the train actual movement or actual location, or a repeated frame that might indicate a replay attack. And while we're completely non-intrusive and we cannot block or manipulate data, we can still indicate it to the right people and the right team and suggest a supportive mitigation for it.
It may not even be, from listening to you talk about that, it may not even be the security team that you need to notify. Maybe it's not a security attack. Maybe it's just something's, wrong with the equipment or something needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and we have several examples specifically around PTC that we have events that can either be interpreted as a cyber attack or as an operational issue. So usually they have a team that decides whether if it's cyber issue or an operational issue, and then route it to the appropriate team.
Okay, so Ivan, then kind of as a follow-up to that line of thought, what are some challenges that you've seen in terms of, using the tools which may or may not have AI embedded in them now, but probably will in the future, and integrating that information into your, from the OT environment into your, sort of existing security operations center.
Yeah, so that's an exercise we've recently began undertaking in there's a bank up here in Canada, and their motto is "You're richer than you think," and I find that pertinent to our conversation because in the OT environment, when you start picking up on all the devices in your environment, you have way more devices than you think. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, you think that yeah, you've got the correct number of licenses, and then next thing you know, we need 30,000 more because we found devices that we didn't know existed. So a lot of the challenges is about understanding all of your assets, where they reside, and what can you realistically do to monitor those devices. As Yanni mentioned, we have and Ali mentioned it as well, when you have legacy platforms or platforms from the 80s or even earlier, the concept of this sort of detection didn't exist. We're still dealing with everything mechanical. So being able to insert the correct layers to be able to monitor and alert has been something that we've been working towards. And another key opportunity and one of our success criteria is the triaging. We don't just have IT analysts that are looking at the alerts. We have Rail-specific OT analysts and that cross-training so that we can spot concerns from an OT perspective, not just an IT alert. That gives us that ability to respond effectively to actual alerts, actual incidents, as opposed to just wading through all of the noise.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, I know we had a few questions planned, but I think we want to make sure that we leave enough time, for the audience to ask some questions. And actually, we've gotten a couple in the chat, and then I guess folks can raise their hands or speak up if they have questions, follow-up questions, or any additional questions. But I'll just start with the ones that we've gotten in the chat so far. The first question is, what are the new elements of IEC 63452 versus existing standards? For example, IEC the 62443, and I know I've done some work on the committee for the 63452 standard, and I think Ali, you said you've also been engaged in that. Maybe you want to try to address the question, and Ivan and Yanni, you may have some input as well.
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. So IEC 63452 is an evolution of a European standard, the TS 50701, which was based on essentially IEC 62443 with the consideration of safety. So they brought in the safety like RAMs into that standard, and also made it very specific to railway. So 3452 is also very specific to the railway applications, and it brings in the elements of 62443, and to make sure that there's a program governance in place, as well as there are technical controls in place that cover both the safety of the railway as well as the cybersecurity elements of it. And my understanding is that once it's published, it will also be certifiable, which means that you can certify your components and systems based on that standard.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's the rail context that it really is the evolution of that, and what that drives is a consistent language and a consistent framework that people can use with, operators can use with their suppliers, operators can use with regulators, and it becomes a much more consistent, everyone's speaking the same language when they talk about rail cybersecurity as it's adopted. And that, there's a lot of very rail specific information that's in the new standard. All right. Another question. Earlier in the discussion, the importance of supply chain was highlighted. In this context, what specific actions can we, as a supplier of communication and computing hardware, take to support and strengthen cybersecurity?
I can take that, being a supplier of the equipment. So I think this goes into the practices of secure lifecycle development, making sure that we have that in place. And what customers are asking more and more is that we provide them certified components, certified against the IC 62443. There is certification that exists for 4-2. And as long as we follow that standard at the IC 62443, 4-1, which is the governance of the program structure, and then 4-2 is the component security requirements, we adopt that. We can certify the components by the ISA authority, and then that way we can provide the assurances that are needed for customers. And I believe that's an acceptable currency when we go to bid for something, or to provide the confidence that these things are secure. But all of that goes into defense in depth application and the secure lifecycle development, making sure that we are providing transparency, providing software bill of material, and the vulnerabilities that are applicable to that. So that's how we can strengthen. And more customers, actually, they are including cyber terms and conditions in their bids and contracts going forward.
Very good. Yeah, and I think I'm seeing that too with a lot of my clients, particularly working through the TSA regulations, reaching out to suppliers and saying, hey, I have this regulation, I have to comply and meet these standards. Can you tell me about your product and how it matches these standards? And we've been trying to push suppliers to proactively understand the regulations themselves and produce materials that their customers can use. So I think all that fits very nicely with the sort of certification process that you talked about.
Yeah, I think what Ali said about software bill of materials, the SBOM, that's a very important part. Like, always supply that with the product, and ask from your suppliers, the suppliers of the supplier, for that as well. And while it's also nice to have, but don't always trust what the document said and try it for yourself. Like, go through a test of the product and see that it doesn't communicate to devices it's not supposed to communicate with, and that the software packages inside of it are really at the version they say they are.
Yeah, and another aspect of that is we've actually seen some chip level backdoors that have existed. So it'll lie there dormant until it's activated and hit. So having the detection, the anomalous detection capability that you benchmark over a certain time period to identify that sort of activity is also very important.
I agree with that. I've just gotten a note that says, hey, we're not taking questions verbally. So if there are any further questions, you'll have to submit them in the chat. I don't think we have the hand raising functionality, or I think actually probably should leave a couple of minutes for you, Morgan.
Yeah. I'll just interrupt you, Mark. I was able to allow Mackenzie Tummers from the chat to pose her question to the panel. So yeah, Mackenzie. Oh, yep. Hi.
Hi, thank you very much, everyone. Extremely interesting presentation. Just my background, I'm a cybersecurity researcher, inventor, and published author. Finished up my master's recently, have a patent pending on an intrusion detection solution for CBTC systems. So this is a really interesting chance for me to hear everyone from the consortium's perspective with Morgan to everyone in the panel talk about some of the issues that cybersecurity professionals face, and railways as well, with meeting those limitations of real-time requirements, the ever-expanding attack surface, and the proprietary systems that are so unique, from operators to the vendors that provide those solutions. So, talking about, you addressed how rapidly this space is changing and evolving. When I started my master's in 2022, I was told by a senior engineer at an operator that, cybersecurity from an OT perspective wasn't really a major concern of theirs because of it being a closed system and being air gapped. So things have changed quite a lot since then. My question for you is really from the perspective of somebody like myself that's, young professional starting off in the cybersecurity space for railways. Given how much the railways and operators and vendors' attitudes towards cybersecurity have changed in the past couple of years, where do you see those opportunities for somebody like myself that has AI and machine learning based solutions for cybersecurity in an OT context, for wireless communications, for railway signaling or train control systems?
I'll jump in with a couple ideas there, because the historical premise has been that since we've air gapped our networks, we're fine. Increasingly, that's becoming a blurred line at best, and in many cases, it's becoming impossible to air gap systems when we're looking at onboard network boundaries. You're not able to air gap systems that you're actively seeking telemetry from when you're doing things such as route optimization. Is there a better way of, and from the perspective of a transit agency, we're trying to optimize our routes and service delivery. So there's a huge opportunity in terms of communication and cybersecurity protections and detections to be built in at the onboard layer for everything within rail.
Again, you should focus at the edge. That's what I would say briefly. Focus at how do you get the information from the OT environment to the cloud, where you can plug it into the fancy AI machine learning system that you want to use.
And Mark, is that just limited to your experience with PTC, or does that include other systems like CBTC or ETCS?
It's gonna include everything, because what you're gonna end up with is a fully instrumented operational technology environment that's collecting every business event, in real time, tremendous amounts of data, and you're going to have to analyze that somewhere, and it's probably going to take place in the cloud somewhere. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you everyone from your engagement in the chat, for joining in on the session today. I'm aware we're a couple minutes over, but I really do appreciate you all taking the extra time to share your insights and expertise on this. That wraps up our discussion in our session for today. So I just wanted to give a huge thank you to Mark Grant. That was a wonderful conversation. So thanks for facilitating and sharing your expert background on this, and thanks as well to Ali Syed, Ivan Sestak, and Yoni Korlander, and to CYLUS, of course, for co-hosting this really interesting session. So thank you all for taking precious time out of your busy days. We can wrap it up there. And again, open invite to anybody, both panelists and attendees, to shoot an email to CUTRIC, myself. I dropped my email in the chat, should you like to learn more about our cybersecurity initiative. Wonderful. Mark, I don't know if you had final thoughts, or any other panelists. I know we're already over, so I don't want to.
I just wanted to thank the panelists, and thank you, Morgan, for bringing us together and giving us a good opportunity to talk about something that we're all very passionate about.
It's great. We need this passion. Keep it going.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.